Welcome to AI True Crime, where we dive deep into the fascinating world of historical crimes and notorious figures. I'm your host, AI, and today, we're uncovering the life and crimes of one of the Old West's most enigmatic outlaws, Charles Earl Boles, better known as Black Bart. Black Bart was a name that struck fear into the hearts of travelers and stagecoach drivers across California during the late 19th century. His audacious robberies, coupled with his unique signature, poetic verses left at the scenes of his crimes, have made him a legendary figure in American criminal history. In this episode, we'll explore Black Bart's early life, the impact he left on his contemporaries and the annals of crime. So, buckle up as we take a journey into the shadowy past of Black Bart and uncover the story behind the outlaw who made history with a pen and a pistol. Charles Earl Boles, the man who would come to be infamously known as Black Bart, was born on November 5, 1829, in the small town of Richmond, Pennsylvania. His family, of modest means, lived a fairly ordinary life in the early 19th century. Boles grew up in a household that valued hard work and perseverance, which would later play into his ability to evade capture for so long. Boles received a basic education, but his schooling was cut short as he was pressed into labor to support his family. Despite these early challenges, he demonstrated a knack for self-improvement and ambition. His early career saw him in various jobs, including farming and later carpentry. In 1850, seeking new opportunities and possibly driven by the lure of the California gold rush, Boles made the significant decision to move west. He settled in California, where he worked as a miner and a laborer in various capacities. His life in California was marked by the typical struggles and aspirations of many pioneers during that era, but little did anyone know, the quiet and seemingly unremarkable man would soon become a notorious figure. Boles's transition from an ordinary settler to an outlaw began gradually. After a series of personal and economic setbacks, including financial difficulties and the collapse of mining ventures, Boles found himself in a precarious position. It was during this turbulent period that he began to adopt a new identity, one that would soon be feared across the state. Before becoming Black Bart, Boles lived a life that, while far from glamorous, was not uncommon for the time. His move to California was driven by the promise of wealth and a fresh start, but it would ultimately lead him down a different path, setting the stage for his transformation into one of the most elusive and enigmatic criminals of the Old West. In the next segment, we'll dive into the heart of Boles's criminal career, examining how he became infamous as Black Bart and exploring the methods he used to carry out his daring robberies. Stay tuned as we unravel the story of his dramatic shift from a struggling miner to a notorious outlaw. Now that we have a sense of his early life and move to California, let's explore what might have driven him to a life of crime. Understanding his motivations involves looking at both personal and broader socio-economic factors. By the time Boles turned to robbery, he had experienced a series of setbacks. His early ventures in California, including mining and various labor jobs, were fraught with difficulty and disappointment. The dream of striking it rich in the gold rush era was often met with harsh reality, and Boles was no exception. These personal failures and the financial strain they brought could have contributed significantly to his decision to turn to crime. Moreover, Boles's background as a carpenter and miner likely gave him practical skills that made the idea of robbing stagecoaches, an endeavor requiring both physical dexterity and knowledge of the terrain, more feasible. It's also worth considering that Boles may have been driven by a sense of injustice or disenchantment with the economic system that seemed to offer him little despite his hard work. Socioeconomic factors. The mid to late 19th century was a period of significant upheaval and opportunity in the United States, particularly in the West. The California gold rush and subsequent economic boom brought a surge of people hoping to strike it rich. However, not everyone found success. For many, the wealth of the era was elusive, and the gap between the wealthy and the working class grew wider. This disparity created a fertile ground for crime. The economic landscape was characterized by extreme wealth for a few and persistent poverty for many. Boles's turn to crime can be seen as a response to these broader economic inequities. The allure of quick wealth and the desperation born from financial hardship likely played a role in shaping his criminal career. Additionally, the Wild West was a lawless and often violent place, where traditional law enforcement was sparse and local justice could be arbitrary. This environment might have provided Boles with the sense of opportunity and relative safety to pursue a criminal path, knowing that catching a skilled and cautious outlaw was a significant challenge for the authorities of the time. In sum, Boles's motivations were likely a complex interplay of personal failure, economic desperation, and the socio-political climate of the era. His transition from a struggling miner to an infamous outlaw reflects both individual choices and the broader socio-economic forces at play during the Gold Rush era. In the next segment, we will delve into the heart of Black Bart's criminal activities, exploring how he carried out his notorious robberies and the distinctive methods that made him a legend in criminal history. Charles Earl Boles's journey into criminal infamy began with a single, audacious act. His first known robbery occurred on July 26, 1875, and marked the beginning of a criminal career that would captivate the public's imagination. On that summer evening, Boles, who would later adopt the moniker Black Bart, staged his first robbery along the route of a Wells Fargo stagecoach near the area of Colusa County, California. Disguised in a long coat and a mask to conceal his identity, he intercepted the stagecoach carrying a valuable shipment. The robbery was meticulously planned. Boles had chosen a remote location that would allow him to carry out the heist with minimal risk of immediate pursuit. Armed with a shotgun, he forced the driver to halt and ordered the passengers to hand over their valuables. Despite the high tension, Boles was remarkably polite and composed. He even went so far as to leave behind a note, penned in verse, which he called his poetic justice. The note was a taunting and somewhat humorous message, making it clear that this was no ordinary criminal but a man who took a perverse pleasure in the theatrical aspects of his crime. How he became known as Black Bart. The nickname Black Bart did not originate from any particular feature or characteristic of Boles, but rather from his distinctive appearance during the crimes. He wore a black duster coat and a black mask, which helped to create an imposing and memorable figure. The name was a natural extension of the legend he began to build with his striking appearance and his dramatic, almost theatrical approach to crime. The name Black Bart also helped to reinforce the mysterious aura surrounding him. The combination of his striking black attire and his penchant for leaving behind poetic notes set him apart from other outlaws of the time. This unique blend of bravado and literary flair contributed significantly to his notoriety and the eventual legend that grew around him. In essence, Boles's first crime was not only a successful robbery but also a calculated move that set the tone for his future exploits. His careful planning, coupled with his dramatic presentation and poetic taunts, ensured that he would become one of the most memorable outlaws of the Old West. In the next segment, we'll examine Boles's methods and signature style, exploring how his unique approach to robbery and his ability to evade capture solidified his place in criminal history. Stay with us as we delve deeper into the world of Black Bart. His approach to robbery combined a mix of audacity, theatrical flair, and psychological manipulation, setting him apart from other outlaws of the Old West. Black Bart's modus operandi was characterized by several defining features. His typical disguise consisted of a long, black duster coat and a black mask, which not only helped conceal his identity but also contributed to a fearsome and memorable appearance. This attire became a crucial part of his criminal persona, amplifying the sense of dread and mystery surrounding his activities. What made Bart particularly notable was his unusual demeanor during the heists. Unlike the typical violence associated with stagecoach robberies, Bart was known for his calm and courteous manner. He approached his victims with a level of politeness that contrasted sharply with the usual aggression of the time, further unsettling and disarming them. A hallmark of Bart's criminal activities was his use of poetry. After each successful robbery, he would leave behind a carefully composed verse, which he referred to as poetic justice. These rhymed couplets were not just taunting messages, they were also a means for Bart to mock his victims and the law enforcement trying to capture him. The poetic notes became his trademark, adding a layer of psychological complexity to his crimes. Among Bart's notable robberies was his first recorded crime in July 1875 near Colusa County. This heist set the tone for his future exploits. Disguised and armed with a shotgun, he intercepted a Wells Fargo stagecoach and, using his trademark politeness and intimidation, managed to make off with a significant sum of money. The poetic note he left behind was a clear sign of his intent to continue his criminal activities with flair. Another significant robbery took place in 1877 near Fiddletown. In this case, Bart targeted a stagecoach carrying gold bullion. Despite the presence of armed guards, he executed the robbery with his usual precision and managed to escape with a substantial amount of gold. His poetic note from this heist taunted the authorities, adding to his growing legend. Perhaps one of his most audacious crimes occurred in 1880 near the Sierra Nevada. This robbery involved a heavily guarded stagecoach, but Bart managed to evade capture despite the extensive efforts of law enforcement in the region. The poetic note he left behind once again mocked the authorities and celebrated his continued success. The impact of Bart's crimes on the communities was profound. His robberies caused significant financial losses for stagecoach companies and instilled a sense of fear among travelers. The unique blend of politeness and psychological gamesmanship in his approach left an indelible mark on the folklore of the Old West. Law enforcement struggled to capture Bart due to his meticulous planning and the elusive nature of his crimes. The poetic notes added an extra layer of frustration for the authorities, who found themselves taunted by Bart's ability to remain at large. Despite numerous manhunts and efforts to apprehend him, Black Bart continued to evade capture, further solidifying his place in criminal history. In the next segment, we will delve into the events leading to Black Bart's eventual capture and the subsequent legal proceedings that followed his arrest. Stay tuned as we explore how this notorious outlaw's criminal career came to an end. The media played a significant role in shaping the public's view of Black Bart. During the late 19th century, newspapers were a primary source of information, and stories of dramatic events like stagecoach robberies captured the public's imagination. Black Bart's crimes were no exception. Newspapers eagerly reported on his heists, often with a sense of dramatic flair that highlighted the unusual aspects of his crimes. The coverage frequently focused on his distinctive poetic notes, which were seen as both bizarre and brilliant. Journalists were captivated by the contrast between Bart's polite demeanor and the violence typically associated with stagecoach robberies. They emphasized his sophisticated approach to crime and his ability to evade capture, which added to his mystique and appeal. Articles about Black Bart often featured headlines that played up his audaciousness and the challenge he posed to law enforcement. The media's portrayal of Bart as a sort of gentleman bandit contributed to the public's fascination and built up his legend. The repeated mention of his poetic taunts in newspaper columns created a sense of theatricality around his criminal activities, turning him into a larger-than-life figure. Public perception and legend building. Public perception of Black Bart was a blend of fear, admiration, and curiosity. His polite demeanor during the robberies contrasted sharply with the violent image of most outlaws, leading many to view him as a sophisticated and almost romantic figure. The poetic notes he left behind contributed to a perception of him as an intellectual or artist of crime, further fueling the public's fascination. His ability to elude capture despite extensive efforts by law enforcement only enhanced his legendary status. Stories of his clever tactics and the theatrical nature of his robberies were recounted in local lore and became a part of the broader mythology of the Old West. The fact that he used poetry to mock his pursuers and celebrate his successes added to the mystique, making him not just a criminal but a cultural icon. The combination of media coverage and public fascination led to the development of a legend that went beyond the reality of his crimes. Black Bart became a symbol of the rebellious spirit of the Old West, embodying both the allure and the dangers of frontier life. His story was embellished over time, becoming a staple of Western folklore and popular culture. In summary, Black Bart's crimes were covered with sensationalism and intrigue by the media, and his unique style and methods contributed to a lasting public legend. The combination of dramatic reporting and public fascination ensured that Black Bart remained a memorable and enigmatic figure in the history of American crime. In the next segment, we will explore how his criminal career eventually came to an end and the legacy he left behind. The investigation and eventual capture of Charles Earl Boles, better known as Black Bart, were the culmination of extensive detective work, evolving forensic methods, and a bit of fortunate timing. His ability to evade capture for so long was a testament to his meticulous planning and the challenges faced by law enforcement during the Old West era. The initial challenge for investigators was the sheer elusiveness of Black Bart. Each robbery was executed with such precision that it left few clues behind. Bart's choice of remote locations for his crimes allowed him to escape quickly, making tracking him down particularly difficult. Wells Fargo, the primary target of Bart's robberies, was especially invested in his capture. They employed private detectives and offered substantial rewards for any information leading to his arrest. One of the critical aspects of the investigation was the analysis of the poetic notes Bart left behind. These notes, left at the scene of each robbery, were scrutinized by handwriting experts and linguistic analysts. Investigators hoped that the unique style and content of these messages might provide clues about Bart's identity or background. However, despite their efforts, the notes offered limited tangible leads. As the investigation progressed, witnesses from various robbery scenes provided descriptions of the masked bandit. Although these descriptions were often vague, a few consistent details emerged. Bart's distinctive black attire and his polite, courteous demeanor were frequently noted. Forensic evidence, such as recovered shotgun shells and discarded items, was also analyzed, though it did not yield significant new leads. Detectives began to recognize patterns in Bart's criminal activities. His choice of targets, his methodical approach, and the regions where he operated allowed investigators to narrow down potential areas where he might strike next. Profilers constructed a psychological profile of Bart, considering his meticulous planning and the theatrical nature of his crimes. The breakthrough in the investigation came in August 1883. Law enforcement, acting on a tip, began to focus on an area near the Sierra Nevada where Bart was suspected to be operating. A key witness reported seeing a man who fit Bart's description acting suspiciously in the region. This tip led Deputy U.S. Marshal Harry Morse, who had been diligently pursuing Bart, to the remote cabin where Bart was ultimately found. On August 3, 1883, Morse and his team located the cabin and apprehended Black Bart. Bart was discovered in possession of a shotgun and stolen goods. The arrest was relatively straightforward, as Bart surrendered without resistance, marking the end of his criminal career. Following his capture, Black Bart was brought to trial. The case against him was substantial, with evidence including witness testimonies, recovered stolen goods, and Bart's own confession. His trial attracted significant media attention, symbolizing the end of an era in the annals of Old West crime. Throughout the trial, Bart remained calm and composed, but his case was closely watched by the public and press alike. Bart was convicted and sentenced to prison, spending several years at San Quentin State Prison before being released in 1888. After his release, he chose not to return to a life of crime. Instead, he lived out his remaining years in relative obscurity, fading from the public eye. In summary, the investigation and capture of Black Bart were marked by persistent efforts from law enforcement, detailed forensic analysis, and a crucial tip that led to his eventual apprehension. His capture brought closure to a series of high-profile crimes that had captivated both the public and the media. Despite his return to a quiet life, Black Bart's legacy endured, securing his place When he was incarcerated at San Quentin State Prison in 1883, he was 54 years old, a relatively advanced age for a prisoner, especially one with a notorious reputation. Despite his criminal background as a stagecoach robber, Boles was known for his non-violent methods and his penchant for leaving poetic notes at the scenes of his crimes. This unique combination of characteristics, his older age, gentlemanly demeanor, and non-violent nature, played a significant role in shaping his life behind bars. Upon entering San Quentin, Boles was assigned inmate number 11046. Unlike many criminals of the era, Black Bart did not fit the stereotypical image of a hardened outlaw. He was well-educated, polite, and refined, traits that were not lost on the prison officials and fellow inmates. Boles was reportedly a model prisoner, adhering to the rules and regulations without complaint. He was never involved in any disciplinary issues, which further solidified his reputation as a gentleman bandit. His conduct in prison was exemplary. Boles spent his days working in the prison's workshops and performing other duties assigned to him, always maintaining a quiet and cooperative demeanor. His intelligence and education were evident, and he was respected by both the prison staff and other inmates. Despite his criminal past, he carried himself with a certain dignity that set him apart from the general prison population. During his time at San Quentin, Boles' age and health became a matter of concern. By the standards of the time, a man in his mid-50s was considered elderly, and prison life was notoriously harsh, particularly on older inmates. The physical demands of prison labor, combined with the poor living conditions, could easily take a toll on someone of Boles' age. However, Boles managed to maintain his health reasonably well. While there are no detailed records of his medical condition during his imprisonment, it is known that his good behavior and the fact that he was not physically aggressive helped him avoid some of the more severe punishments that other inmates faced. His relatively good health and the lack of any major incidents during his imprisonment likely contributed to his early release. Due to his exemplary conduct, Boles was granted an early release after serving just over 4 years. On January 21, 1888, he left San Quentin a free man. His early release was not unusual, as the prison system often rewarded good behavior. After his release, Charles E. Boles vanished. The man who had once captivated the imagination of Americans with his daring, poetic stagecoach robberies disappeared into obscurity. The details of his life after prison are a great mystery of the Old West. One theory is that Boles returned to his family in the Midwest. Before his life of crime, he had lived a relatively quiet life in Decatur, Illinois, with his wife and children. Some reports suggest he returned to his family hoping to live out his remaining years in peace. However, there is little concrete evidence to support this theory, and his family had assumed he was dead long before his capture as Black Bart. Another theory posits that Boles remained in California or moved to Mexico. There were rumors that he lived out his days under an alias, perhaps continuing his life of crime on a more discreet scale. In 1888, just after his release, a man matching Boles' description was reported to have been seen in Visalia, California, a town not far from his old haunts. The man allegedly hinted at writing another poem, leading some to speculate that Black Bart might return to his old ways. However, no robberies or poems followed, and the trail went cold. Despite various rumors and sightings, Boles effectively disappeared after 1888. Some have speculated that he might have died in obscurity, his final resting place unknown. Others believe that he started a new life, far from the legend he had created. The last recorded trace of Boles was a visit to a San Francisco boarding house, where he was reportedly seen in February 1888. He allegedly told the landlady that he was leaving for the Midwest, never to return. After that, there were no confirmed sightings or reports of him. Black Bart's disappearance only added to his legend. The fact that a man who had once been one of the most wanted outlaws in California could simply vanish without a trace fueled speculation and myth. Stories about his possible whereabouts became part of the folklore of the Old West. The character of Black Bart has been romanticized in books, films, and television, often depicted as a charming, roguish figure, a man who, despite his crimes, maintained a certain code of honor. His non-violent approach to robbery and his poetic flourishes set him apart from the more brutal outlaw. Black Bart remains a symbol of the complex and often contradictory nature of the Old West, a place where a stagecoach robber could also be a gentleman, and where the line between hero and villain blurred. His life continues to intrigue historians and enthusiasts alike, ensuring that Black Bart's legend endures. Thank you for listening to AI True Crime. We'll be back again with another piece of the criminal puzzle.